It is a curious thing that the very word miracle often provokes in us both a thrill and a suspicion. A thrill because it hints at something beyond the common walls of our existence, a crack in the ordinary through which eternity might shine. A suspicion because we have been schooled to trust only in the mechanical, the repeatable, the predictable. And yet, I wonder if it is not our suspicion, rather than the miracle, that is the greater stranger in the universe. For the cosmos, in its vastness and mystery, is not a prison of iron laws, but rather a living poem written by the hand of God. In every poem there is rhyme, but also surprise. In every symphony there is order, but also crescendo. What if miracles are not intrusions into a locked system, but rather the windows, briefly opened, that remind us the house of nature has never been self-sufficient, but always sustained by its builder? I have often thought that the world, left to itself, feels like a room with windows shuttered. We grow accustomed to the furniture, the cracks in the floorboards, the rhythm of night and day. We may even imagine that this dimly lit chamber is all there is. Yet when, for a fleeting moment, the shutters are thrown open and light from the sun pours in, the room is not abolished, but transfigured. It was always meant to be a place receiving light, and now, with the windows flung wide, we see it as it truly is. Such are miracles, not violations of nature, but revelations of it, moments when the divine sun shines in upon our dimness. Some insist that miracles are impossible because laws of nature cannot be broken. But here, I must pause and ask, whose laws are they? A law is not a policeman patrolling the cosmos. It is simply the description of what ordinarily happens. A man who has always seen billiard balls collide in predictable ways might believe they are compelled by some invisible tyrant. But if the hand of the player reaches down and alters the arrangement, the law of collision has not been overthrown. Rather, a higher agency has chosen a different arrangement. In the same way, the laws of nature describe the canvas upon which the artist paints. They are not handcuffs upon his fingers. Miracles, then, are not contradictions of reason, but manifestations of a greater reason, the reason that lies behind all things. To call them impossible is like a character in a novel insisting that the author cannot enter his own story. Yet what else is the Incarnation but precisely that, the author writing himself into the narrative? That moment in Bethlehem when infinite majesty was swaddled in rags is not merely a miracle among others. It is the miracle, the central point at which eternity bent low to touch time, and by doing so made every other wonder both possible and intelligible. And let us note this: the miracles of Christ were never performed as spectacles to amuse the curious. He did not turn stones into bread to satisfy his own hunger, though he could have done so with ease. He did not summon thunderbolts to impress the scoffers. Rather, his miracles were always signs, pointing beyond themselves. The blind man given sight is not merely a tale of healing. It is a window into the truth that he is the light of the world. The water turned to wine is not simply a village wonder. It is a glimpse into the wedding feast of eternity, where joy flows without ceasing. The raising of Lazarus is not an isolated marvel. It is a signpost toward the greater miracle, when the stone will be rolled away not from one man's tomb, but from the grave of the world itself. I confess that many balk at miracles because they seem too rare. Why should God intervene so sparingly, they ask, if he truly loves us? But I would suggest that their rarity is itself part of their design, for the point of a window is not to become another wall, but to break the monotony of the wall. Were the windows always open, we might cease to notice the light streaming through. It is precisely their extraordinariness that draws our attention, that shocks us into awareness that there is more to the world than dust and decay. A constant interruption would not be miracle but chaos. God is too much an artist to spoil his own canvas with careless strokes, and yet miracles do not leave us staring forever at themselves. A window is meant to direct the gaze beyond the glass. The true miracle is not merely the healing, but the healer, not merely the provision, but the provider. One can stand before a window and only admire the frame, missing entirely the country stretching beyond. So, too, it is possible to marvel at the feeding of the 5,000, and yet fail to recognize the bread of life who multiplies himself for the hunger of the world. I suspect that one of the deepest reasons we resist miracles is not intellectual, but moral. If a miracle is possible, then God is possible. And if God is possible, then he is Lord, and our lives are no longer our own. It is a humbling thought that the same power who raised the dead might also demand that we rise from our selfishness, our pride, our little prisons of sin. Miracles are not only consolations, they are also summonses. They whisper to us that the world is haunted by heaven, and therefore we must live as citizens of a kingdom not yet fully seen. And what, after all, is the greatest miracle we may know even now? Not the healing of a limb, nor the stilling of a storm, wondrous though these be. The greatest miracle is the transformation of a human heart. When a man long enslaved to bitterness is freed into forgiveness, when a soul twisted by despair blossoms with hope, when pride bows into humility, these are not less miraculous than the opening of blind eyes. Indeed, they are the very purpose for which the other miracles exist. Miracles, then, are not magic tricks to satisfy curiosity. They are windows into the world behind the world, signs of a kingdom breaking in, hints of a morning yet to come. They remind us that history is not a closed circle, but a story moving toward its consummation. They stir within us that old homesickness for a country we have not yet seen, but which has already seen us. And if the windows are real, then so too is the world they open upon. The difficulty with miracles is not, I think, that they are too strange, but that they are too familiar. For though the parting of the Red Sea or the walking upon water are set before us as extraordinary events, we forget that every breath we draw, every flower that blooms, every child conceived, is no less astonishing if we would but learn to see it. The line between the natural and the miraculous is not so thick as we imagine. What we call natural is simply God's customary work. What we call miraculous is his extraordinary work. But in both cases, it is the same hand, the same giver, the same love sustaining all. Think for a moment about the miracle of the loaves and fishes. We are tempted to think of it as a violation of some cosmic rule. But what, truly, is bread? It is the grain of the field, nurtured by rain and sun, grown from the earth into stalk and seed harvested by man, ground, mixed, baked, transformed. What is this, if not the quiet, daily miracle of provision? Christ did in that one moment, in the hands of his disciples, what the Father does each year upon the fields of the world. The feeding of the multitude is simply the curtain pulled back, so that in a single day we see compressed the long mercy by which God feeds the nations. And is not the same true of water turned to wine? Each season the vine, drawing life from the soil and warmth from the sun, fills itself with sweetness, and man by his craft ferments it into wine. Christ only hastened the process, revealing that the joy of creation has its fountain not in soil or sun, but in the Creator himself. What appears to us as an anomaly is, in truth, a heightened parable of what is always true, that God's world is charged with his generosity, and every harvest sings of his abundance. Thus, the miracles of Scripture are not alien intrusions into a world otherwise closed, but rather they are clarifications, illuminations. They are as though the author wrote in bold letters what he usually whispers in the margins, and in seeing the bold print, we may learn at last to read the whole text with fresh wonder. But I must tell you a further truth. Miracles, though rare, are not restricted to ancient days. The God who acted then is the same God who acts now. I do not mean that we should chase after signs as though faith depended on them. To do so would be to make idols of the very windows meant to lead us on to the landscape beyond. And yet, from time to time he grants us glimpses, a prayer answered in a manner far beyond chance, a protection unaccountable by any natural cause, a providence so precise that it seems tailored for one soul. These may not make headlines, but they awaken awe in the heart of the one who receives them. But let us beware of reducing miracles to mere useful interventions. The point is never simply to solve a problem, though that may be included. The point is to awaken our dulled vision, to remind us that we live in an enchanted world, where every atom is upheld by the word of his power. It is we who grow blind, we who call the extraordinary ordinary, we who yawn before the sunrise, as though it were a machine grinding on. Miracles strike us like a bell, ringing us awake to reality. There is, however, another aspect worth noting. Miracles, though they lift the veil, are not themselves the substance. They are signs pointing to a greater thing. A signpost may guide the traveler toward the city, but the sign itself is not the city. If one were to stop at the sign and embrace it, worship it, even build a home beside it, one would miss entirely the destination. So too with miracles. Their glory is not their own, but borrowed. They are lamps catching light from a sun not yet fully risen. And this brings us to the final and most humbling point. For there is a danger that we may long for miracles in the wrong way. We may crave them as proofs, demanding God submit himself to our tests as though he were on trial. Or we may hunger for them as spectacles, seeking thrills rather than transformation. But miracles are not given to gratify curiosity or entertain the crowd. They are given to draw us nearer to the miracle himself, Christ, in whom all fullness dwells. If a miracle does not lead us to deeper faith, to greater love, to a surer hope, then we have missed its meaning. Indeed, the day will come when miracles as we know them will be swallowed up in the great miracle to which they all point. The resurrection of Christ was the first fruits, but the harvest is still to come. On that morning, when the trumpet sounds, The dead will rise, creation will be remade, and the ordinary will become extraordinary forever. Then we shall no longer need windows, for we shall stand in the country itself. The veil will be lifted, and we shall see him as he is. So let us not despise the windows, nor worship them. Let us rather look through them, and by their light prepare our hearts for the dawn. For if miracles are true, then this weary world is not closed, not futile, not abandoned. It is a waiting room, trembling already with the promise of glory breaking in. There is a peculiar irony that many modern minds reject miracles while embracing a universe more improbable than any wonder of Scripture. We are told that all things, reason, love, beauty, even our own longings, are the accidental offspring of blind chance, swirling atoms, and purposeless motion. And yet, the same men will scoff at the suggestion that water could become wine by the will of Christ. But if the entire cosmos is itself an inexplicable event, why should one find a smaller marvel unbelievable? If the first grain of dust ever sprang into being, if from nothing came all that is, then surely the God who called existence out of the void can also bid the storm be still. Indeed, every sunrise is a reminder that we already inhabit a world built upon miracle. That there is something, rather than nothing, is the great miracle which makes sense of all others. To insist that miracles are impossible is like a fish declaring that waves cannot break upon the surface of the sea. He may rarely witness it, but the ocean he swims in is never sealed. I have also found that miracles are intimately tied to longing, for they do more than reveal God's power. They awaken in us a yearning for home. Consider how the healed leper must have felt, not merely restored in body, but received again into fellowship, tasting in advance the great restoration to come. Or the widow of Nain, when her son was raised, did she not feel in her arms not only her child returned, but the whisper of a world where death itself would be undone? Each miracle is like a melody that begins in time, but strains toward eternity. We are stirred by it because we recognize, deep down, the tune of our true country. And so, miracles teach us hope. They are not guarantees that suffering will always be lifted in this life. Christ healed many, but not every sick person in Palestine was made whole. He stilled storms, yet the sea has swallowed countless sailors since. The point was never that pain and death could be evaded indefinitely here, but that they will be overcome ultimately there. Miracles are signposts pointing to the horizon, where the final sunrise will scatter every shadow. They whisper to us that history has a destination, and our tears will one day be wiped away. But perhaps the most humbling thought of all is this: you and I are called not merely to behold miracles, but to become them. For when the Spirit of God enters a human heart, transforming fear into courage, greed into generosity, hatred into love, that is the truest miracle of all. No surgeon's hand can accomplish it. No philosophy can compel it. It is the supernatural breaking into the natural, the eternal reshaping the temporal. Every saint is, in this sense, a miracle walking in the world, a living window through which heaven shines into the ordinary streets of earth. Thus, the Christian life itself is meant to be miraculous, not in the sense of constant spectacles, but in the quiet radiance of grace. Our forgiveness of enemies, our patience in suffering, our joy amid sorrow, these are not explainable by the world's logic. They are the Spirit's testimony that God has not abandoned His creation, but indwells it still. And every time a weary soul looks upon such grace and glimpses something of God through it, the miracle has done its work. So, my friends, let us not imagine miracles as interruptions to reality. They are reality, breaking through the fog of our illusions. They are the windows into the world behind the world, cracks in the shell of time through which eternity peeks. They tell us that the story we inhabit is larger, richer, and more beautiful than our senses alone can perceive, and they summon us not merely to wonder, but to worship. For the same God who turned water into wine, who raised the dead, who walked upon the waves, He is even now at work in you, preparing you for a greater miracle yet. For the day is coming when faith will give way to sight, when hope will blossom into possession, when love will be all in all. On that day the windows will be thrown wide, the house of this world will be flooded with light, and we shall find ourselves standing in the very country for which we were made. And then we will say, as all miracles have been whispering to us from the beginning, "Behold, He makes all things new." One of the most important things we must grasp is that miracles are not given for spectacle, but for meaning. The modern man often asks, "Did it really happen?" as though the value of a miracle rested upon mere proof of the supernatural. But the deeper question is, what does it mean? For if God opens a blind man's eyes, He is not only restoring vision, but announcing that He Himself is the light. If He multiplies bread, He is not merely feeding the hungry, but revealing Himself as the bread of life. If He calms the sea, He is showing that He is Lord not only of storms without, but of storms within the human heart. Miracles, therefore, are like parables enacted in flesh and time. Each one is a sermon, preached not with words but with acts of power. And just as a parable demands the humility to listen, so a miracle demands the humility to see. The proud may witness the same event as the humble, yet walk away unmoved. The Pharisees saw Lazarus raised, yet plotted to kill both the man and his Lord. The window was opened, but they refused to look through. This, perhaps, is the greatest tragedy of all, that one may stand before the shimmering door of eternity and still choose the darkness behind Him. It is also worth noting that miracles have always been met with division. Some fall to their knees in awe, others scoff, dismiss, or rage against them. And this division is not confined to the ancient world. Even today, the possibility of miracle divides hearts, for it touches upon the very foundations of belief. To admit one miracle is to admit that nature is not closed, that there is a mind and a will beyond our own, that we are not sovereign lords of the universe, and such a confession is intolerable to the prideful spirit. Thus, the resistance to miracles is rarely intellectual alone. It is moral. For if God can act, then He can command. Yet notice also the gentleness with which miracles come. They are not overwhelming, not blinding in their force. God could, if He willed, write His presence across the sky in letters of flame, leaving no room for denial. But then faith would be stripped of its freedom, and love of its dignity. Instead, He offers signs clear enough for the willing heart, subtle enough for the resistant one. A miracle is never coercion. It is invitation. It whispers, rather than shouts, "Come and see." And let us not forget that the greatest miracle, the one upon which all Christianity stands or falls, is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If that event is true, then the whole structure of unbelief collapses like a house of sand. If it is false, then our faith is empty, and we remain in our sins. But if it is true, if that tomb was truly emptied, not by theft or imagination, but by the Lord of life himself, then death has been conquered, and the world is forever changed. The resurrection is not merely one miracle among many. It is the axis upon which history turns, the pledge of a restored creation, the guarantee that every tear will one day be dried. And perhaps here is the most wondrous thought of all. The resurrection is not merely an event to be admired from a distance. It is a miracle that continues to unfold. For all who are united with Christ are raised with him even now. Every Christian life is meant to be a living echo of Easter morning, a witness that death does not have the last word, and that love is stronger than the grave. Miracles, then, are not fragments torn from an alien world. They are pieces of the true world breaking in upon the shadowlands. They are foretastes of the feast, down payments of the inheritance, the music of a symphony whose final movement has not yet begun. And every time we behold them, whether in the pages of Scripture, in the quiet providences of our own days, or in the transformed lives of those around us, we are reminded that the kingdom of God is already pressing against the borders of this world. I tell you, the windows will not stay shut forever. One day they will be flung wide, and the light that now streams in as through a crack will pour in like a flood. The miracle will become the atmosphere we breathe, and what now seems impossible will be the very air of our existence. Until that day, let us treasure the signs he gives, not as ends in themselves, but as whispers of a homeland that is nearer than we think. When we speak of miracles, we must take care not to think of them as decorations upon the fabric of life, like jewels scattered upon a plain garment. No, they are more like the threads of gold woven through the tapestry, which reveal the true pattern of the whole. For the world itself is a miracle. The laws of gravity, the birth of a child, the blossoming of a rose. It is only our dullness that calls them ordinary. God does not make ordinary things. He makes wonders that we have grown too accustomed to notice. A miracle, then, is but the jolt that wakens us to what has always been true, that we are living in an enchanted creation, upheld at every instant by the breath of its Maker. It strikes me that miracles are not only windows through which heaven shines, but also mirrors in which we see our own condition. When Christ healed the lame, the deeper lesson was that we too are crippled by sin and cannot walk rightly without his grace. When he cleansed the leper, it was not merely a mercy to that man, but a reminder that all of us bear a deeper uncleanness that only his touch can remove. When he raised the dead, it was not simply to restore one family's joy, but to foreshadow the universal resurrection for which every soul must prepare. In this sense, every miracle is both comfort and challenge. Comfort, because it shows God's tender power. Challenge, because it exposes our need of him. Nor should we imagine that miracles were ever meant to be the chief foundation of faith. Faith is not built upon wonders, but upon the character of the one who works them. The Israelites saw the Red Sea parted and the manna fall, yet their hearts wandered. Crowds saw Jesus feed thousands, yet deserted him when his teaching grew hard. Miracles may open the door, but only trust in the living Christ will carry us through it. They are torches that light the way, but if we do not walk by their light, we remain in darkness. Some complain that miracles are unfair, that they seem to favor one person while another continues in suffering. But here, too, we must remember that every miracle is provisional. The healed body still aged and died. The multiplied loaves were eaten and consumed. The raised Lazarus again entered the grave. The point was never permanent relief here, but a sign of permanence to come. The miracles of Christ were not designed to abolish suffering in this age, but to point to an age where suffering will be no more. They are promissory notes of a kingdom still arriving, foretastes of a feast not yet served. I believe this is why the Christian is called to live both with gratitude for miracles when they come, and with faith when they do not. For the absence of a miracle does not mean the absence of God. Sometimes his refusal to part the sea is itself the greater miracle, teaching us to walk upon the waters of trust. Sometimes his silence is not abandonment, but an invitation into deeper fellowship. To demand a miracle at every turn is to treat God as a servant of our desires. To receive his gifts as he wills is to know him as Lord. And so, my friends, miracles are never ends in themselves. They are arrows pointing, melodies beckoning, hints drawing us forward. They awaken our longing not simply for the extraordinary, but for God himself. For the true miracle is not that water became wine, but that the Word became flesh. Not that Lazarus walked from his tomb, but that Christ walked from his. And in him we too shall rise. Therefore, let us live in this world with eyes open. Let us not despise the ordinary, for it is the stage upon which miracles rest. Let us not scorn the miraculous, for it is the whisper of the world to come. And let us remember that faith, hope, and love, the quiet graces of daily Christian life, are themselves miracles in miniature, given by the Spirit who dwells within us. For the day hastens when the windows will not simply be opened, but dissolved, when the walls themselves will vanish, and the house of this world will be flooded with the light of God's glory. And then we shall discover that the miracles we glimpsed were but the earliest rays of a sunrise now filling the heavens. And so we return, at last, to the heart of the matter. Miracles are not mere interruptions to the natural order, but revelations of the deeper order by which the universe is sustained. They are not fireworks to amuse, but signals of a kingdom that is both already here and yet still to come. To behold a miracle is to sense, for a fleeting instant, that the veil has grown thin, that eternity has brushed against time, and that the true story of which we are characters has begun to write itself more plainly upon the page. The greatest danger in considering miracles is to stop at them, to treat them as curiosities, proofs, or diversions, rather than to follow where they point. For every miracle is a signpost, and the destination is always Christ. To stand marveling at the signpost and never journey onward would be folly indeed. Yet many do exactly this. They seek wonders for their own sake, craving evidence but not surrender, spectacle but not obedience. They wish for the windows into the world behind the world, but not the King who dwells in that brighter country. Let us be wiser. Let us look through the window, not at it. Let us remember that when Christ multiplied bread, the true bread he offered was himself. When he opened blind eyes, the true sight he gave was faith. When he raised the dead, the true life he bestowed was eternal. These were not isolated marvels, but foretastes of a greater redemption still unfolding. The resurrection of Jesus is the fountain of all miracles, for in it we see both the pledge and the pattern of what awaits us. If Christ is risen, then the door of death itself is no longer locked. If Christ is risen, then sorrow and despair are not the final word. And if we live by this truth, then our very lives may themselves become windows. For what greater testimony is there than a life transformed by grace? When we forgive where the world expects vengeance, when we endure suffering with hope, when we love without condition, we too become signs of another world. The Spirit within us works miracles of character no less astonishing than those wrought upon water and bread. We are called not simply to witness miracles, but to embody them, to be living evidence that God has not abandoned His creation, but has entered it and renewed it from within. One day, my friends, miracles will cease to be needed, for the world to come will be one vast miracle, the consummation of all that has been promised. The dead will rise, creation will be restored, and the very light of God will be our sun. The windows will be flung wide forever, and what was once rare and wondrous will become the common air of eternity. Until that day, let us treasure the signs He has given, not as ends in themselves, but as glimpses of the homeland to which we journey. And so, I leave you with this thought. The true miracle is not that God once walked upon the waters of Galilee, but that He even now walks upon the waters of our troubled hearts. The true miracle is not only that He raised Lazarus, but that He will raise you and me into everlasting joy. And the greatest miracle of all is that Love Himself has stooped to seek us, to save us, and to bring us home. If this reflection has stirred something within you, I invite you to share this journey with others. Like this message, if it has brought you light, comment with your own thoughts and questions. Share it, so that more souls may glimpse the windows of eternity, and subscribe so that together we may continue to walk these paths of reflection and wonder. For miracles are not relics of the past. They are living whispers of the future, breaking into our present. May your eyes be open to them, and your heart ever drawn through them to the One who is Himself the miracle of miracles.